Welcome, everyone. I'm here with Daniel Wald today. He's a Vortex trainer, teacher, facilitator. I don't know what to call you, but you're that. In Vortex energy healing. So I've worked with and trained with, went through Daniel's foundational training. And have had lots of conversations with Daniel on the topic of awakening and embodiment and pre-awakening versus post-awakening and the issues that we can encounter in both areas and kind of what unfolds and how things unfold and um, lots of the issues I've experienced, Daniel's had some remedies for, that other things weren't kind of cutting it and working for. And so anyway, welcome, Daniel. It's good to have
Thanks,
you here.
Matt. Yeah, nice to be here. It's great to see
Yes.
you.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so Daniel's an Aussie as well. He's originally from Melbourne, where lots of
Yep.
our listeners will be. And so let's start on the topic of you. How did your unfolding occur? Kind of what's
How's your awakening going today?
yeah, how's things? Yeah.
So firstly, thanks for having me here. Um, it's been great to get to know you as well over the last few months, and I really found your story fascinating, and what you contribute as well into when we have groups and classes is really valuable for the group, um, because it really shows, it takes the spiritual fantasy immediately out of awakening, right?
Yeah.
And that's a really important thing to say, like, this is it. This is
Yeah.
kind of real. And 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 there are paths of awakening. And even though there are sort of tracks, vortex healing as a track of awakening, it's still never going to be the same for anyone. And 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 I guess I'm saying this because it's easy to get into this mindset of this is what I need to do. And even if I take a particular class or if I do a particular meditation, this is what's going to happen. And that's sort of a little bit a part of the egoic desire for something better.
Yeah.
I want to be better. I need to, or I just want to break out of this.
Yeah.
How the hell do I get out of this? You could say that my experience of that started as a really wee little kid. And it started off as kind of a traumatic event. My grandmother died, and it was really, she kind of brought me up in the first few years. Um, so where's grandma gone? Well, she's gone to heaven, of course, Daniel. And like, oh yeah, yep, I can dig that. But what happens after heaven? And it was a really simple sort of innocent question at the time.
Good
But my
question.
mind was already going to, what's after that? Well, there's,
Yeah.
if grandma's gone to a place, there has to be something next. There
Yeah.
was sort of this deep inquiry. And now I was 6 or 7 years old. So what's an adult going to do that is going to leave the room? Just can't deal with that
Yeah.
sort of question. So, and it was a very innocent sort of quick moment, but that moment um, created a few different things actually at the same time. It was almost like this mini explosion. And in that explosion, it created a deep internal panic, like, oh, what does happen next? Like what happens when I die? For a 6-year-old kid to start contemplating death and after death and after death, it it was pretty shocking where it did create sort of a shutdownness on one level. But it also created a survival mechanism to get through that. So it created this very nice personality that was able to care for others and be liked and and be happy and sort of have this kind of a facade of a happy kid, where everything is normal and great, but on the inside is just completely panicking to this sort of existential question of what the hell is all of this and when does it all end? Um,
Mm.
um, and that went on for quite a number of years. It then sort of created these almost psychedelic experiences sort of through my childhood where I'd be in the backyard and I'd look at these ants going across the garden and I'd start contemplating, well, what if inside the head of that ant was a whole earth and there was a whole world in there, and then what happens at the end of that? And it would sort of get my mind sort of again trying to look out what's beyond all of this and what's beyond all of this and really stuff that was too hard for me to verbalize or to define as a little kid. Um, but stuff that I'd really sit with and sort of trip out on almost and just you know sort of just contemplate for hours what is all of this, because what all of this is not what's being presented to me as the facade of reality. Uh,
Mm.
um,
It's like
now,
those existential questions, they kind of come organically at times, and it's uh, like in the Sermon on the Mount, Christ says,
Mhm.
Truly I tell you, when heaven and earth disappear,
Mm.
the eternal truth will remain the same. And as soon as you said what happens after heaven, like that quote came
Mm.
to mind. And it's like,
Mm.
like it's a kind of koan, and it's like
Yeah,
existential contemplation, like, because we thinking, you know, like in Christianity, they believe that, heaven is eternal and you go to heaven. But he says when heaven and earth disappear,
yeah,
so it's
yeah,
kind of like inviting you to question those things, what is it that doesn't change, what's here, what is reality, and we follow that thread. And it sounds like, it happened in a kind of organic way from a really
yeah,
young age,
yeah. It did, and I like that you used the Cohen as an example because the closer that contemplation gets to, the mind has to stop for
Yeah.
something to let go. It's a bit like the Cohen puzzle where the mind just has to give up. If you sort of look at a Cohen, you just go, the mind's just going to go, yeah, I don't know what that's. So it sort of creates this letting go of mind where the mind in that moment just stops and
Yeah.
just lets go. And in that, heaven and earth disappears and there it all is, right? It now, we've spoken about emptiness in the past and the feeling of emptiness, but and even at that point when heaven and earth disappears from a particular side of the coin, it does can feel empty, that there is this sort of emptiness. And yet, if one goes deeper into that emptiness, something new emerges, which is kind of the opposite of emptiness, which is just full. Um, um, that emptiness, at least from my experience, started off as well from this side of the coin, let's say, from whatever is still in that place of contemplation, of desire, of separation, that there is someone contemplating it, a separateness contemplating it. Whatever is looking on the other side of that feels empty, or it can even look like mystery. Well, the
Mm.
abyss. I've heard people who are like sort of going into the abyss, all these different sorts of terminology. At some point through my, and even when I say my these days, Matt, it's just kind of like there's just this laughter there. It's like
Yeah.
there's just this sort of laughter of my, and it's not a laughter of ha ha ha. You finally get it, but it's almost like it's just divine laughter. That there's this just big cosmic joke of all of this, and even the contemplation that it could be mine, right, is just laughing. But let's just come back into my contemplation. Whatever is still there in that experience of my does experience what is not mine or what is not me or I or my as empty or as mystery, um, um, until that sort of drops away as well and something new comes through.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I just leave it like that for a moment.
Sure, sure. And so, at what point, because like we define awakening practically basically the same way,
Yeah.
that it's reality waking up to itself. We lose our ordinary sense of egoic identity of being just
Mm.
this kind of contracted, isolated, separate, suffering person. And we kind of
Mm.
wake up out of that. We lose this sense of I that has been identified with I am Matt or I am Daniel, or I'm a
Yeah.
this and that and blah, 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 blah. And
Yeah.
so, at what point did it kind of awaken out of that? Because at that point, we're kind of waking up out of that,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
what kind of happened for you there?
Yeah. Um, I like what you said that because there is sort of this process, or call it a process of awakening from what I'm not.
Mhm.
And I think what I was referring to with that emptiness changes is where I'm awakening to what I am.
Yeah.
Something sort of shifts in that. But so at for myself, I'd spent many years sort of really just focus on what is this gap. It's almost like there was this gap there between
Yeah.
what I am and what I'm sensing is reality. Is the truth of reality. Because it's all reality. Even my experience in separation is still a real experience. But it's a reflection of reality. But it's
Mm.
still there. It's still there. And I guess I'm saying that because sometimes we'll hear the word illusion and just sort of bypass everything and say, it's
Yeah.
all an illusion, it's not real. Well, it's real. I mean, if we were sitting next to each other, we could pinch each other on the arm and,
It
it's no
hurts.
illusion. That
Yeah,
that
yeah,
hurt,
yeah.
right? Um, um,
I'd say reflection or, like I haven't come up with a good enough word for it, but like the mind, when they say the world is illusion, it's more like the subjective experience of the world is illusion, It's
mm,
just made up of conditioned images and words and narratives, like egoic belief systems and ego structures that we perceive reality through. So it's more like it's not the world is illusion, it's more like your world is illusion. You're making it up in your mind, and
yeah,
and so we don't perceive reality as it is, we perceive it as we are. And in the same way, we don't experience the present moment as it is. We experience it through these images and narratives and belief systems. And we also experience as ourself through that. That becomes our self-reflective mechanism. And then
yeah,
I look at Daniel and I have all these ideas and thoughts about him. I don't
yeah,
see you here and now, but I see the
yeah,
past however many months or
right,
however many years, and that becomes an image that I superimpose over reality. And then I have one of myself. So we live with these veils that kind of
right.
obscure
And
reality.
and and isn't it amazing, Matt? Because all those old images you have of me, those moments that sort of strung together on time, all of those come with an evaluation, a comparison, a judgment, really, really way, way, way back on
Yeah.
however on the snapshot of yourself at
Yeah.
that time, on however it is with you relating. There's something within our interaction that does something within yourself that gets triggered as that's Daniel, and therefore we tend to, until a certain point, have this. It's almost like we're looking for the evidence of our past selves that
Yeah, yeah,
this is what I
exactly.
am.
And that gives the
And-
continuity and the feeling of me with a past and a future versus like
yeah,
when that's kind of it doesn't go away after awakening, but it's
right.
kind of loses its center,
It loses
and
its center and its
yeah,
juice, and and
yeah,
and and its influence. It
yeah.
loses influence, and yet it's still there. So at one point, I was really like, come on, um, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. And you could see this point in my heart that was still holding on. And you interviewed Rick Wyman recently, and Rick has been my teacher for some years. And at one point, I went up to Rick and I said, I think, and he said, "You'll never get it." He said to me, "You'll never get it."
Yeah.
Because you're trying, because it is where you're looking from. He said there's one little point left there in your heart, and you're trying from that point. So wherever you look, you're never going to get it. and I can't
Yeah.
help you, and I can't help you, except he helped me at that
Yeah,
point.
yeah, yeah. Fascinating. It's
And
like Saint Francis, what you're looking for is what is looking,
right, right,
I went through the same thing. I was looking for myself everywhere, not because I didn't even know what awakening was. And there was
yeah,
just nothing in my experience, but I realized there's something left, and then I was like, oh, it's
yeah,
not looking, and it's
yeah,
like where I'm looking from. It's like really bizarre, like
yeah.
that
So,
moment.
and so then I went and had dinner with another Vortex Healing friend and teacher in Ireland. His name's Anthony. And we sat down for dinner. I was telling him, I'm working on this, and and Rick said this, but I'm still going for it. I can't. And he just looked at me. He said, Daniel, just give up. And it was like the clouds parted between his eyes as the words came out. And it was not Anthony talking to me. It was this divine presence coming through his words that I finally had, after all of these years and probably lifetimes of trying to get out of this thing, it just gave up. And something just surrendered in my heart where the thoughts of I no longer just went into that place of the heart. It just,
Yeah.
and it was a very soft moment. It was not it was not a difficult moment for me. It was actually quite a soft, beautiful sort of almost like a soft water slide, not one of those fast kind of things, but a really fun one where you could sort of see the nature. In fact, we were sort of sitting out on a terrace, and the first thing I noticed was the birds and the trees, and it was like I came back into a whole new reality. Um, except everything was the same. We were sitting at a restaurant. Before I knew it, there's a risotto in front of me and and a drink, and we just went on eating. And it was like nothing had changed.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
just we just continued out. We didn't have a spiritual initiation or an anointing,
Yeah,
any of
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah,
Just ate
yeah.
our dinner and went home.
It's just like ordinary,
Yeah,
almost, and
yeah,
like strangely familiar. And
yeah,
it's and people, get mistaken when they think like awakening it's an addition to your experience, whereas it's
right. Nice
actually a
one. Nice.
recognition of the way things already are.
Yeah,
It's like things are already what they are, but we're
yeah,
kind of misperceiving them, like due to the wrong focus of attention. Like attention is fixated and viewing reality through this lens, and when we kind of open in the way that you described, it's like, oh yeah, like it's the way everything is already, and
yeah,
um,
yeah.
it's different to being like a spiritual experience of being kind of blasted open with Shakti or
Right.
anything like that. It's kind of got an ordinariness to it.
And what was interesting on the way home, I caught the train back out. I was living sort of outside of Amsterdam at the time, and just being on the train, then sort of noticing everybody around me and noticing consciousness of people around me was already less attachment into these forms of people. It was more like these bubbles of consciousness having thoughts and bubbles of consciousness somehow, even though they didn't realize it, reacting with the train carriage of all these other bubbles of consciousness within this bigger bubble of consciousness. So it kind of went from individuals in there. And this is just on the way home after our terminology in vortex healing is losing the core, dropping the core veil. It's just, it's just terminology, but it's
Yeah.
that place of core identity in the heart. Um, but it was amazing to see all of these core veils sort of sitting in the train, really unconsciously interacting with each other and with the consciousness within the bubble of the train. And it was really fascinating to see that from that new place of freedom, on one hand, there's all this more stuff that I could see that, it's almost like there's one less place to hide. Like, oh, jeepers, look at this human conditioning now. And at the same time, it was kind of freer just to see it as it is,
Yeah.
as as it presents as human experience, but it's actually more than that. It's more complex and deeper than that.
And it's like that kind of experience won't necessarily happen for everyone after they have that initial opening, you know?
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
different people have different openings, like different energetically, different energetic openings, different abilities to perceive and sense. And some
Yeah.
people just nothing changes, you know?
Yeah. Absolutely.
And like it's and you know, often what I notice is people mistake those experiences for the actual what has woken up and the shift itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
That's a great point.
yeah,
Because we hold on to experiences, don't we? As
yeah.
from that place of, and then we go chasing those experiences, and you start. For a while when I was sort of just really focused on waking up, I would hang out some spiritual groups. Um,
No.
yeah, and the biggest thing that I found from that, I guess the reason why I'm saying that is because they're chasing that experience.
Yeah,
And so it tends to then, and with all due respect, everyone's trying to, everyone's doing their best.
for sure.
But within that, I would find because it's whole looking for that experience, you would find practices that are just focused on the experience, and it would
Yeah.
actually take you the other way from awakening, which can end up in abuse and all sorts of stuff that can happen. Which I saw a lot of it, and I would really run away, and it actually put me off spirituality for many years. But it didn't stop the goal of what is all of this about? Where's the gap between Daniel and
Mm.
just that?
Yeah.
Um,
It's like Adya when he said, you know, when he woke up, he also woke up out of Zen, you know, and
yeah,
like we
yeah,
wake up out of spirituality in the kind of same way to reality, you know,
yeah,
into the way things are. And, you know, it's like post waking up, all of this can continue also, you
yeah,
know, and the difficulty and the grasping at
yeah,
different experiences and, you know, but awakening itself isn't a shift in experience, but a shift in the experiencer, you know, and so
yeah,
it's like it's not reliant on any kind of experiential quality. It's just what's always here, you know, like its
yeah,
experiences inevitably change, but then that happens in contrast to something that doesn't. You know, we only know that things
yeah.
change because there's something that doesn't change that is aware of it all.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And then if we look at it through the human experiences, it sort of presents as these little threads of of creative expression, let's just say. And one of those creative expressions might be anger. It might be terror or sadness or loneliness. And and the first thing that happens when we're faced with those sort of expressions is, oh no, it's like we go into battle with that. That's not
Yeah.
me. That's not what I want. And part of my own sort of liberation from that is appreciating my inner anger and appreciating when loneliness comes up, or although I don't really experience loneliness so much, but sometimes, I miss a friend. And rather than going into battle or into sort of a contraction from that, I sort of just appreciate it for what it is, and just sort of let it pass through. One of the biggest teachings for me with that was watching Amma, the divine saint Amma, the hugging saint, if people have never
Yeah.
heard of her. Um, and she'd have her band, her bhajan band next to her, and she's, and I'm sitting there in India with my family watching her, and everything is like, in bliss and all this great
Yeah.
time. And then all of a sudden, one of the tambur players plays a wrong beat, and she pays out on this guy, right? And I thought, wow, there's the divine as anger.
Yeah.
There is this anger coming through, and before I knew it, it's gone. It's just there as an expression, and
Yeah.
There's no holding on to, there's no attachment. And, it's like the divine has used this expression of anger to correct itself or to balance itself or to just to play, just to experience itself as that anger. So, the guy plays out, Amma goes
Yeah.
bum, bum, bum. I'm freaking out, thinking, how can the divine be angry? And then something just relaxed inside me was, of course the divine could be angry.
It's like, and those preconceived notions that we have about what's spiritual and what's not,
Yeah.
it's like that they're the same as anything else, and they become kind of repression structures, of the
Yeah.
ego in order to maintain a sense of inner control and self-censoring, and
Yeah.
they're just our kind of childhood conditioning taking on a spiritual lens. And
Yeah.
anger, work allowing my own anger has been a huge thing over the years,
Mm.
letting my anger up. Um, and like, I love how you said like expressing itself as that anger, because at a certain point, like that the gap closes, between
Yeah.
that changeless background and what's changing. And, over the years, it's been like, you know, such deep transformation happening, in the body and in the felt sense. In, the
Mm.
body kind of goes through its own reorganization and its own awakening, like it
Yeah.
wakes up within itself until the whole felt sense of the body is experienced as the same substance as what's woken up to itself. And just about anger, the more my system can really allow anger, like the more it's felt as power, like as strength,
Mm.
as aliveness, and there's a kind of
Mm.
like bliss to it. And it's like, it's like the strength of the soul, like
Mm.
expressing itself as that kind of what doesn't change kind of individuates itself into this kind of strength and will. And
Mm.
that's kind of the essence of anger.
Mm.
So we're kind of moving on from awakening to embodiment, but just to add one more thing to that, the more that the system can fully relax and let go of control into that, it's kind of like, loss of will and the terror that that can evoke. You say, oh my God, I'm going to kill someone, like let go of control completely. But then it's like something else steps in and you're oriented and moved by something with such wisdom.
Yeah.
Like it's like the same intelligence that beats your heart, knows how to move and metabolize the anger and what to kind of do with it. And so like I spoke about with this with Rick, like that it becomes a process post awakening of more and more of the surrender of the will, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an intelligence one couldn't fathom without letting go of that control. You
Yeah.
couldn't fathom how intelligent and how safe it is.
Yeah. It's the most terrifying thing, to the
Right.
mind. Like,
Right. It's like
yeah.
safe.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And you mentioned embodiment and anger. It's a nice sort of coming together because coming back to my own path pre-awakening, all of that anger um, sort of embodied as an enlarged liver. So for many years I had so coming then back to all the way back to that first experience as a kid, I think I was really angry with people for leaving me and not helping me through my existential crisis. There's had all of this stuff going, well, how could you just leave me to all of this? Like this is really big. And none of you and they couldn't. I mean, they didn't even for them it's just like a moment that they would never have even remembered. But there's this inner thread of anger that's now being suppressed because it becomes a survival mechanism of okay, I need to survive in this world, make friends, love people, help people, guide people. At the same time, there's this sort of burning anger underneath that's not being
Yeah.
met and not being allowed. So it became a liver issue where for many years I had as a young kid had an enlarged liver. Um, and it was really only through the awakening process that all of that liver digestion stuff that was going on here that actually was able to let go and surrender, where I just don't have any of those issues anymore.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's
um,
through the anger coming up and kind of integrating and moving through rather than being repressed.
Yeah, and just being met through we could say it through heart or just recognizing it as an expression of the divine, of this is just an expression that is just there. Even to say it needs to be expressed or not is still got this sort of storiness on top of it. It
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah,
need
yeah.
anything. It really doesn't need anything. Um, um, so I could really say that the letting go of the repression
Yeah, that's it.
and to be safe with the anger. I did a couple of these spiritual workshops where you have to show, hit a bag and cry and all that stuff, and it didn't do much for me, but at the same time, maybe it did ripen me towards wherever it was that sort of let go. But in that letting go, it's really where, and of course with vortex healing, energies and the processes and all that. But that's all really a manifestation of that same letting go. It's really,
Yeah.
to me, it's not really anything different.
Yeah, so what we do in our embodied processing modality, it's a somatic modality. And I emphasize this every call, and because it's such a kind, it can be so subtle that tendency to want to shift and change and manipulate our experience, like when there's anger, to want it to change or to feel it. So like, I unconditionally accept you anger, like, so you go away, Um, like I'm embracing my anger because I want it to leave. And if I embrace it, it'll go away, I need to accept it, like to get rid of it. Like and it can be so subtle, but what we teach is like building that capacity just to stay with it, like
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
that's kind of what we're doing and like feeling it from the inside, because when we
yeah,
bring our attention right down inside it and feel it directly and just stay with it.
yeah.
Like we're stepping out of the mind into the actual energetic felt sense itself. And as our capacity grows to be able to do that, we can
Mm.
actually embody and feel more and more of it and allow it to move. And the nervous system can start to, it's like digesting food, the system
Right.
knows how to do it,
That's
but it's
it.
like we've dammed up our stomach, with
Yeah,
ego and repression structures and,
yeah.
all our trauma
And we can't eat the
issues.
chocolate cake all at once. We can't eat the whole
Yeah.
cake at once.
Bite size,
So
exactly.
at bite size, we eat that, um, and then it just does it by itself. Surrender just happens. And another sort of trap that we get into, and there's such beautiful, amazing teachers out there, like you mentioned, Adya and
Yeah,
Eckhart Tolle, and so many that that have brought language and Rick as well that have brought such great language to their experiences. But the language is just language, and one of the traps that we can tend to do is get caught on the language.
yeah,
And really what's coming through Adya and Eckhart and various teachers is the transmission through and within the language. The language creates the almost like a bridge, but the deeper bridge is actually something that cannot be defined. There's this stillness that you were talking about earlier that is the language. Um,
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
and where that can become a trap for many people is that, okay, what did you say? What does that mean? How do I reconcile that? But
yeah,
earlier you said this, and well, if I just think about this particular thing, and it can become a trap, but at the same time, that's similar to my need to wake up, and then we'll just give up. Something then
yeah,
just
yeah,
gives
yeah,
and surrenders. So
yeah.
part of that trap is also part of the ripening as well.
Exactly. Well, they do that I think it's in one of the schools of Zen. The one where they kind of whack you with sticks, and like the more brutal one is like they
Yeah.
purposely induce
Right.
that futility. Like concentrate
Yeah.
on your breath and don't think about anything. It's like that.
Yeah.
That's impossible. No one can
Yeah.
do that, and it's meant to induce that. And same as like koans. You think about it and try and work it out until you just I can't do it. So it brings that. ego, the mind, to its limitation, and
Yeah.
then it has no choice but to give up and experience its own limitation and futility at that point. It's like I would not recommend that for someone with a traumatized nervous system,
Yeah,
like
no,
going
no.
down that path. It's going to make things a lot worse. But there is other kind of softer schools of Zen, but
Yeah,
it's like and it's like we hit a kind of a dark night where that the mind, it's like I can't do it, I can't
yeah,
get awakening, and I'm told to stop doing, and then I try to give up and I can't even give up properly, like
right,
it just
right.
any the Taoists call it beating a drum in search of a fugitive. Every step you
Mm,
take, he hears you coming, so it's like a
yeah.
futile endeavor, or like a house of mirrors where everywhere you turn you bang, 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 and then it's like, oh, can't get out. And then the floor opens
But,
up.
but just to backtrack back to what you said, you don't recommend it. But if that's what the path is, then that's what the path is.
Yeah,
And that some of that could be just part of our karma, that our karma is to wake up through that particular path. I wouldn't recommend for many people your path, and yet
yeah, for
your
sure.
path is full of grace and wonder
Yeah,
and then it's part of your karma and part of your dharma to be able to facilitate and serve others. Again, it's just as your
for sure.
own process of letting go. So as much
Exactly.
as we would love to pick our, even people that come to Vortex Healing, which is a path of awakening and healing, we all have this bright idea, yeah, I'm going to do that, right? But that idea is part of something that, let's just call it a deeper will, a deeper will that's free within you. And then, of course, we then take that free will within us and go, "That's my will be done.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
I've
exactly.
I've got a great idea. I'm gonna join an awakening course."
Yeah, yeah,
But that stone has sort of already been set in motion, and
exactly. Well, after, I've been clean from heroin 11 years now, and it's like in hindsight, the whole thing, I can only see it in hindsight. At the time,
yeah,
no.
sure,
But it
sure,
was like the whole thing was a fierce kind of grace. It gave really specific insights into the nature of addiction, into the nature of
Mm,
trauma. Like the whole thing was riddled with gifts from grace,
mm.
um, and it led to waking up without even, no, like
Yeah,
without even seeking it,
yeah,
in the
mm,
same way. And then it led to all sorts of experiences after that, and then it kind of wrapped itself up in a gift, in the
yeah,
way I work with other people. It's very
yeah.
unique, and without those experiential insights, like I wouldn't be able to do what I do or
No,
teach how I
no,
teach. So, and I heard Alan Watts talk about it once. He said, you can look at two white blood cells kind of fighting and killing each other in my bloodstream, and you can say, oh no, like that's terrible. And he says, but like from the perspective of the whole organism, it's needed and healthy and harmonious,
mm,
and it's really
yeah,
hard to see that like in the time
yeah,
if we're going through something.
yeah,
But like there can be gifts in everything. And in our traumatic experiences, in the hardest times in our life, you know, like there's gifts in that if we choose to
yeah,
kind of see them.
yeah. You
Yeah.
know, I was walking along the coast last time I was in Australia. I was down by the Mornington Peninsula, just going for a walk.
Yeah. Hot
And
springs there are good.
oh yeah, this was sort of by the back beach, the surf area.
Oh yeah.
And surf was crazy. There was people out there. There was kids jumping off the rocks into the rock pools because the tide was up. And I was just at that moment contemplating how unbelievably beautiful it is. Like it was one of these moments where everything just opened up. I couldn't fathom the beauty of creation in that moment. The sea, but also then I was noticing the cliffs, like where the water comes up and creates these beautiful. It was just like and it was a playground for the children, and yet at the same time there was this contemplation of the destruction that came beforehand to create that playground. The
Mm.
storms and the you know cliffs had to sort of fall into the ocean to create what it created, so new art could be formed, so new playgrounds could be formed. But there was death there. Animals would have died as that
Yeah.
happened, and storms came through, and it's just part of the cycle of life where that beauty came up through the destruction and the pain of that destruction, which then created that place of pure stillness and appreciation and heart opening. And
Beautiful. Yeah.
it's really a beautiful moment. And I often now look in nature, and even you walk in the forest and you see a leaf falling from the tree. And it's that moment where its life has ended as a leaf.
Yeah.
That identity as a leaf, and there it goes, and it goes
Yeah.
back into the ground, and it
Yeah.
becomes food for the new leaves.
Yeah.
And if you sort of tune into tree consciousness, it's a very, very, very heart-opening thing to tune into, because it doesn't really have that I am a leaf,
No, no,
no.
it doesn't. Yeah, 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 yeah. I often say we don't look at that tree and say that's Bob in there growing that branch. Like it's just the intelligence of life, you know. We don't look at
Yeah,
that cloud and give it an ego, give it an identity within the cloud.
yeah,
It's not separate from the totality. And that's,
yeah,
kind of what awakening reveals to us is that neither is this. Like
yeah.
it's all one and unified. And just as you were talking about the cliff and the destruction, it's like diamonds came to mind, how diamonds are
Mm,
created. Like they're just put under
yeah.
so much pressure that
Mm,
it creates a diamond. And
mm,
death has been such a deep contemplation, and over
yeah.
the years as things have unfolded here, because I've witnessed a lot of death.
Mm,
Um, and kind of in the same way, that you said when you were a kid that that existential kind of contemplation
mm,
and like contemplating death, and kind of really looking into it, like what would
yeah,
happen if
yeah,
everything just disappeared. And
yeah,
it can lead to that same gap and that
yeah,
same opening. And then, through that gap and that opening, it's like it gives birth to, as you described, the fullness, it's kind of
yeah.
birth and death, kind of just like a toroidal kind of energy field. Like it's one happening, creation and destruction happening together. And as you painted a beautiful picture of that when you were talking about the beach.
I have a really similar thing with death and meditating into death, and it feels to me sort of. I'm only actually thinking about this now that you say that, but whenever there's this sort of deepening or movement or something within, let's call it the divine takeover of this body and
Yeah,
of the
that's
sense
good.
of self, um,
Yeah.
I get called to then meditate on death, and it's funny that every time I do so, it almost feels like that's it. It's the end of the road. There's nowhere else
Yeah,
to
yeah,
go,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Then there's another
you
one.
know? Like a couple of years ago, I had this experience where I just project into my own death. I just sort of meditate my own. So I had this projection of going into the light and moving on to the next phase, and I just sort of meditate onto it, meditate, and then I just sort of fell asleep. And then in the middle of the night, it was like this whole sense of reality just came crashing down. It just all this sort of identity just dissolved. I sort of woke up from my sleep. It was like we'd call it an awakening movement or another sort of takeover. And in that moment, it was like, well, where would I go? It really had this, and I would hear it from various teachers or readings that I'd read in the past. Well, where would I go? Where would I? And my mind would get it. I'd sort of
Yeah,
get it, like, oh yeah, where would I go? But I actually really felt it for the first time when my body actually could relax into letting go of itself. Um,
yeah,
and at that point, I thought I was done, right? I thought, yep, that's it, I'm done.
yeah,
Until, something else comes up. It was like, well, hold on. There's still this identity that feels that needs to so they just kept getting into more subtle and
yeah,
subtle and subtle identities where the most recent experience of that, I was sort of dropping into that. And the divine actually, I just call it the divine, or sort of flipped it around where, well, if you're dropping into it, there's someone still dropping. And so
Mm.
something sort of flipped the other way where I was trying to drop into this deeper place and it actually came up. So it actually came up as a full body experience where rather than dropping into it, it was like the divine came in to take over this way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because there's still something subtly separate that's trying to
That
kind of,
to
yeah,
drop in.
but then it goes the opposite way and kind of,
And and something came in this way where every cell of my body was burning. It was like going through a fire. And then as it's going through a fire, there was again just an invitation just to relax, just to let
yeah,
it burn. And then when that could fully relax and open, something then just sort of shot through my spine. You could say as an experience, as the sort of this new Shakti, and then the body sort of reconfigures. It took about 2 weeks to sort of reconfigure itself and sort of go, well, what's all this about now? What's it has
yeah,
to sort of find reality again, like, family stuff,
yeah,
emails,
yeah.
phone calls, just logistics, but from this new place.
Like the
Um,
orienting center
yeah,
changes, and
yeah,
then there's
and
like
it needs to,
disorientation and
yeah,
like it needs to learn how to function from a different place, and it's
yeah,
almost like the body has to relearn certain things. One of my teachers said when her when her survival instinct let go,
yeah,
in the lower belly, she had to learn, like the body had to learn to kind of feed itself again, and yet you hear of some
yeah,
horror stories like
absolutely,
about it,
absolutely, yeah.
like people in
And
India like getting put into nappies and stuff because like they've gone too far, like.
how has that been for you? I mean, have you had to relearn things over the
Yeah,
time with the body?
lots of times, like when it kind of first happened, there was just this sense of like almost like having no ground,
Yeah,
and like I'd lay on the floor and shake, like and just shake and shake and shake, and um like waves and waves of terror, and learning to relate to other people from a place of like almost like not knowing who I am, like, and without referencing the past, without referencing the future. And I remember feeling like a baby, I
yeah,
don't know how to move, I don't know how to walk, I don't know how to talk. But I had that anyway, and so it was entangled with all these issues, after spending from
yeah,
12 years old on drugs until 26, and then waking up. Like I remember, not knowing where to put my hands, like, oh, should I put them in my pocket? Like,
yeah,
like I'm walking weird, just like, all those sort of things that were happening. And then like awakening happened, and it's like I was all over the place, like really emotional. And the thing is, it's like, I because I didn't know what had happened, but I read all these books. Some people gave me books, and I read them and thought, oh, this is what's happened. But it
yeah,
didn't live up to what they were saying,
yeah, yeah,
like I still had heaps of issues, like, I was still really reactive. I still had heaps of terror moving through my system. Like even now, like it doesn't live up
yeah,
to what they
yeah,
were kind of saying, like the
yeah,
humanity is and continues to be completely all there, but like
yeah,
it's almost like now there isn't any separation even from the feeling of my humanity. Even though I know there's still stuff repressed, there's still stuff that's going to come
yeah,
through. But
yeah,
the kind of, like we could call it more unity consciousness, where
yeah,
there's it doesn't feel like anything, even anger or sadness or grief or pain, like there's anything separate,
yeah,
from what's woken up. It's all kind of one unified experience, and
yeah,
the process from there, which includes a lot of the relearning, that kind of it happens organically. It's not something you have to try and do, but
yeah,
like the body finds its feet, but um is just deeper and deeper, more surrendering of control over to
yeah,
that. And then that will expose everything that doesn't trust letting go of
yeah.
control, and then that starts to come up and move through,
Yeah,
and then there's a deeper letting go of control, and it just keeps going, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I haven't found an endpoint.
Well, I think the endpoint is a figure of the imaginary
Exactly.
mind.
Yeah. Exactly.
When will this end is a part of the conditioning.
Yeah.
That's the conditioning itself talking.
Yeah.
Um, which is interesting too, because it as you, at least in my experiences, as one lets go and the divine takes over more, it changes our relationship with time. And not so much even ticking time, like should I be late or for, not that sort of time, but more of this place where time keeps things it keeps things sort of glued together, sort of creates more of a stickiness of our relationship with our sense of who we thought we were. And part of that glue is this identification with time. And I think time, Matt, is part of how the miracle of creation, anyways, where the divine sort of becomes aware of what, the divine as awareness. Well, there's nothing else other than the divine. Even oneness is a number, so let's just say there's nothing else.
Yeah.
So it in its own awareness, being aware of, it sort of creates this, let's call it the reflection, as we said before. That reflection has to reflect off something or create something. And all of a sudden now we have space and time. We still don't have a universe yet, but we could say that first space and time is consciousness itself. The building blocks of all of this. So, and I think I'm saying this because one of the traps that I had, part of this was thinking that all of my conditioning, my humanness was bad.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
that there's something
yeah.
wrong with it, right? But
Yeah.
actually it's a miracle. The as big a miracle of waking up is the miracle of separation.
Yeah.
Because without separation, none of this could even be here for the divine to experience itself as all of this.
Yeah, exactly. And it's that process of kind of waking up, but then there's that process of waking down, where
Mm.
and more gets included, and
Yeah,
it's like
yeah.
that inner kind of movement of trying to get away from, or like the Buddha would describe it, craving and aversion, that kind of there's something wrong, that belief that
Yeah,
there's something wrong with me,
yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
well, there's something wrong with this anger and it needs to change. But more and more it's like, instead of a process of negation,
Hmm.
which is, it's more becomes a process of inclusion,
Nice. Yeah.
over time. Um and more and more it's like, or less and less it's felt as conditioning, it's more
Hmm.
just felt as expression and
Yeah.
present moment kind of spontaneity moving through.
Hmm.
But we can fall into these traps of, and I talk about this in our embodied processing training a lot, that I kind of touched on it before, that as long as we're trying to fix ourselves or think that there's something wrong with ourselves and we're trying to heal from that place, we're healing from a deeper sense of deficiency, a sense
Hmm.
that we're not whole already, that there's
Yeah.
something wrong with me. And so then anything we do actually perpetuates that belief. It
Yeah.
gets caught in a loop. And so
Yeah.
kind of what I hear you saying is, when that that feeling that there's nothing wrong with my conditioning is that sense of inner deficiency, that there's something wrong, dot, 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 and I need to fix it, starts to ebb away. And then there's just a kind of relaxing, and that's when we become authentic, I think.
Yeah. Or authenticity comes through.
Yeah,
Same
exactly.
thing. Same what you're saying.
Yeah.
And where I've noticed traps, because I think we've spoken about this, but anyways, is that particular wanting is still part of the path and part of the process until it
Yeah, it
just
has
gives
to
up.
happen. Yeah, it has to happen. Exactly. Yeah.
Otherwise, we sit up here in fantasy land in a yoga studio in Bali, and with all due respect, I'm just being joking. I'm
Yeah,
I'm just
yeah, yeah.
I'm joking there too, but
Yeah, no, it's
um,
a cliche.
yeah, but
Yeah.
like we're sort of sitting on top of it all,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then we start looking for experiences, blowing things up through our crown chakra, or trying to do all
Yeah.
this weird, funky stuff, which is nice. It's
Oh,
fun,
for
but
sure. Like do it,
it's
but
yeah. And
yeah.
I remember Rick used to tell me a story of this guy that would sit with Papaji and would be really, really strong with energetics and it could blow people's crown chakras open from the other side of the room and could do all this great stuff and look at me and like how amazing all this energy work and stuff. And at one point, and he would always try to impress Papaji, of course, because look how spiritual I am and look what I can do.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
And
yeah.
Papaji would always ignore him. And I think he would sort of nudge closer and sort of nudge closer. And at one point, the first time Papaji spoke to him, he just said, "Are you done? You finished?"
Yeah.
And the guy just said, "Yeah, yeah, I'm done.
Exactly the same thing as kind of what Anthony said to you, just give up.
Just give
Like,
up. Just
yeah.
you done? Yeah, okay, yeah, I'm done."
Yeah. And it's like we do things until we don't, that
Yeah,
and it's like but what I find helpful is to see that mechanism at play, because as
yeah,
long as it's coming from an unconscious place, as long as it's like our whole healing is oriented from a deep core belief that I'm unlovable, there's something wrong with me, and I'm
mm,
trying to heal from that place, as long as that's
yeah.
happening unconscious, we can get stuck cycling for a long, long time,
Lifetimes,
Yeah, yeah,
lifetimes.
but like just seeing it, it can bring that sense of futility, like,
Yeah,
it's like, God, like, everything I did was coming from that place, and that inner sense of deficiency, it's like money doesn't rule the world, a sense of deficiency does.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
what makes
nice.
the economy go
Yeah,
round. If
yeah.
we didn't have that inner sense of lack, that there's something wrong with me, the economy would collapse.
Well, that's how marketing works, I guess,
Yeah,
doesn't it?
exactly, exactly. And the Buddha said enlightenment is the end of dukkha. Like he didn't say
Mm,
suffering.
mm,
Dukkha is the Sanskrit term, but suffering is apparently a poor translation. What's better is lack,
mm.
deficiency or
Yeah.
dissatisfaction. I've heard it put, that's that inner sense of
Mm,
dissatisfaction where we don't feel whole,
mm.
something feels existentially wrong with us. And it's universal, I've worked with people from many, many different countries,
Yeah,
and that core belief that there's something wrong with me seems really
yeah,
fundamental to
yeah.
to ego identity.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I agree with you that lack is a core, probably one of the most core issues of humans in our experience of separation.
Yeah.
And possibly it's because there's this point where we've gotten lost from who we are. So in that
Yeah.
place, in that first sort of movement away into the reflection of ourselves, there's this loss of who we really are. And then it starts to play out. It'll find stories and it'll find ways for that expression of lack, loss
Yeah.
to play out in all sorts of ways.
Exactly, and then it becomes the yearning and the longing and
Yeah.
the search, for
Yeah.
to return to wholeness. And so,
Yeah.
that's the kind of spiritual journey in a nutshell, is that
Yeah.
feeling of lack then expresses itself as longing, yearning, and seeking, and eventually returns itself
Yeah.
back to
That's it.
wholeness.
It's
Yeah.
inevitable.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It is. It's inevitable.
Yeah. Mm.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
All right. Was there anything you wanted to finish on, or you happy
Not
with that?
really. I just really like hanging out with you like this
It was good. Yeah.
and chatting and just chatting about life.
Yeah.
I can see why you why your path is facilitation, what makes you such a good facilitator. And even though I haven't, I can just see it because of your burning sort of inner devotion and an awareness of what's going on. Your path and also your path has not been a typical path is really set you up to serve others. And I think there's going to be and have been lucky people to come on their path with you.
Thanks. I feel the same about you. Like there's been so many things that I've been kind of stuck with for years that have been looping, and
Yeah.
but then it's like I met you and it's just
Yeah.
like, like just and then I want to emphasize this too. There's different times, where like there was a really long time I needed to work on learning to regulate my system and build my
Mm.
capacity to feel and kind of
Yeah.
reassociate with my
Mm.
experience. And then there's been times, for energy healing, and then there's been
Yeah.
times for kind of deep inquiry and
Yeah.
contemplation. And like just for the listeners, like if you're on this kind of journey, we all have an inner compass. It's like an inner GPS. It's the same thing that, how birds fly to the other side of the world with no map.
Mm.
They know exactly
Yeah.
where they're
Yeah.
going. It's the
Yeah.
same. We have that innate intelligence within us.
Yeah.
And, they call it the Sat Guru, or,
Mm.
the kingdom of heaven is within, or we could point to many traditions, but there is a yearning and a longing and an inner GPS that we can trust,
Mm. Yeah.
and we don't need to delegate the authority outwards all the time. It can be helpful,
Yeah.
but there's something within that knows the way.
Beautiful.
Awesome. All right. Well,
Yeah.
we'll do this again as well at some
Love
point.
to. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.